listening to Yoshida talk, and one of the things he was saying is that the full content implementation plan for patch 5.3 of Shadowbringers was done before Shadowbringers shipped. That's when he, along with the two MSQ writers, basically went on a retreat. They came back from their writing retreat, and the plan was done. Now, of course, there's a iteration process, I believe, that happens after that. But, you know, I think an individual FF patch is typically a bit smaller than a WoW major content patch.
Generally, yeah.
So, you know, that maybe if we're going to say that their 5.3 is the same as WoW up to 5.2, or sorry, not 5.2, up to, you know, 9.2, for, like, their equivalent, because you've got to remember that FF14 does not have the same budget as World of Warcraft. Now, that might change, given how things are right now. So at least for what that game's used to, it seems like they're able to plan that far in advance. Whereas with Blizzard and World of Warcraft, you know, I forget who it was doing the interview, but they were saying that patch 9.1, like core story beats and things like that, were only falling into place as of late 2020, early 2021. And in my head, that they didn't have the full storyline, like all of the details, for Shadowlands done by when they started, was like... And, you know, I mean, I even think, like, I say a show I like, Battlestar Galactica, and you know that bit where it's like, blah, 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 the start, talking about the Cylons, and then it says, and they have a plan. Like, I love that show, but I'm fairly sure that's actually confirmed to be bullshit. They didn't really know exactly what their ending would be. That's happened with a fair few shows. But generally, that's a way to have a sort of a meandering and not that satisfying narrative, and that's absolutely what WoW has had recently. So it seems to me like they get their big core beats plotted out, but I just have to wonder, like, if, you know, if before the ship of Shadowbringers, they have Shadowbringers 5.3's full content implementation plan done. Like, Blizzard clearly don't have that with World of Warcraft. They couldn't have with patch 9.1. And even if they did, the premise of any content implementation plan that they would have had to have been thrown in the bin. Because patch 9.0 clearly did not go how they thought, because the systems weren't liked by the players. So I think it's this, like, overall thing where Blizzard just seems to develop a lot more by the seat of their pants. I would imagine that their cutting room floor has probably got a fair bit more content than over on the FF side. That's a speculation. But I do know there's, like, a fair amount of cut content in, you know, fair amount. Even, like, yeah, there's things I've heard. Whatever, it's not really that important. And every game has got a big cutting room floor. And, you know, if you do have the resources to make all the cool things in the universe, and, like, a bunch of them just don't fit and go on the cutting room floor, that's not a bad thing. But I just really wonder, are they a lot less planning ahead of themselves and how they do their work than with FF? And maybe with FF, because it's such a narrative-driven game, and it seems like, you know, even like their raids and stuff, it all just kind of comes out of what the narrative really demands. Just like all of that. I just wonder if it's an easier to plan game. It probably is an easier to plan game, but I think you definitely make your game harder to plan when you put all these big risky build around systems in your game. Because, like, if you had lots of, you know, plans for, like, classes and other systems for future patches, but you're stuck there with domination sockets kind of sucking, class balance being really messy, covenant balance being really messy, like, how are you going to get the time to develop those cool things? And you end up having more fixing of things than you maybe planned for.
Yeah, well, I think there was a comment in chat that talked about FF14's patches being a lot more static in terms of, you know, there's usually a formula that they follow that they've grown to, like, they adapt a little bit over time with how they actually execute on things, but they largely go, this is point 1, it has this. This is point 2, it has this. This is point 3, it has this. And that just, to me, seems like they have the core, like, structure laid out, which means that everyone who's working on them has substantially more freedom within that area. But it's like, instead of large-scale freedom, it's small-scale freedom. So it's the minutiae they can actually focus on and get correct, versus the World of Warcraft team, who I feel like they won't be able to think ahead, won't be able to work ahead, because they're just going, oh shit, what's happening? What's going to I don't know what's going to be in, as an example, what's going to be in 9.2 when you're working on 9.1. So there's nothing I can set in stone. There's nothing I can set up interestingly narratively if you're a quest writer, stuff like that. Whereas in FF, it just feels a little bit more like, yeah, everyone knows what they're doing. And that reminds me of how Yoshi P talked about his producing style. And to be fair, like he said, no one should ever make a game this way back when he was working on A Realm Reborn. And he said something to the fact of he would micromanage as many details as possible. And he would have, like, just in terms of time, he would know how long every task took and made sure that everyone had, this much time. So, yeah, we're going to figure out how this task takes 2 hours. So I know you can do, he said they work basically full 40-hour weeks, but 30 hours of work on actual game systems.
Because like meetings and
stuff take up the rest. But that's, okay, that takes 2 hours. You can do 15 of those in a week. Done. Sorted. And some of that will come down to like kind of production on the fly. But it seems like World of Warcraft is designed in a lot more different kind of way where there's so much changes over time. How do the developers expect to know what they're actually doing?
Yeah. I think that with Yoshi P, it's worth maybe people realizing it is a complete miracle. Because it depends, right? Because that's basically one humongous sprint.
Yeah.
It seemed like the way that ARR was done was essentially basically trying to use like the speed and aggression of Agile to Waterfall.
Yeah.
That's you know what I mean, right? And it's very, very hard to the thing with Waterfall, right? So there's always different ways of working. To be honest, I fucking hate Agile and Scrum. I vastly prefer the shape-up methodology of Basecamp, but that's a slightly different thing. I mean, it does have a lot of Scrum and Agile in it, but it's more working in like 6-week iteration cycles, and just a few things like that are a bit different. But it's like one of the things with Waterfall, which is just when you're kind of like linear, going through and you're very just timetabling every task and you're doing it that way. When that's bumped off, it's very bad.
Of course.
It's very bad. And then you have to do a lot of cutting and stuff. And getting accurate time estimates is very hard.
Yeah.
Very hard. It's because like you can have the same category of task, but they will take wildly different amounts of time. So to do that is just, I think a minor miracle. And I think it's just because they were so micromanaging in a way. They really must have just made it so their employees didn't have to think about a single fucking thing other than this is the thing I've been assigned right now. I have to do that.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. And getting accurate time estimates, like the one thing he did say is he started off, I think, in like 1 or 2 week cycles of time estimates. And as their confidence level in provided time estimates increased, then they could expand their kind of like active time window of, the next like leap of the project management. It's just interesting. Project management is fucking fascinating. It is seriously a topic that I'm actually very passionate about. I know that sounds really sad, but whatever, that is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I think as well, when he talked about really making content to the average, and that is where I think FF14 actually does really well, because lots of its bits kind of like are done to the average, but it's like that's actually what you need to do to be able to make the whole thing to the overall level of quality. God, yeah. So it's interesting. I don't know what it is. Like, it's really impossible to know without having like spy cams within Blizzard, which of course would be a ghastly thing. But evidently there is a content production issue that's going on. I know COVID hit them, but why did COVID hit them a lot harder than it hit Square Enix?
Or outside of maybe something like Ubisoft where they seem to have problems. I don't think there's many developers who've been hit quite as hard as Blizzard, at least not with the like obvious reasons.
I mean, almost everyone has been hit hard enough.
Yeah,
we're not talking about like, oh, all other developers didn't get hit by COVID. Definitely not true.
Yeah,
but it seems like Blizzard got giga hit hard.
Yeah, and it seems to me that a lot of them kind of recovered, not like recovered quickly, but you know, the full impact is kind of measured in their sense, where, you know, we've seen a bunch of game delays, we've heard reasons for those delays, but they're kind of going, okay, we've redirected course, we might be slower, but we're not completely knocked off balance. But it seems like Blizzard have had issues that have stemmed since. That's kind of an outside perspective, so I imagine I am wrong and they are actually pumping away fairly decently, but it just feels like they've been derailed harder, and maybe there was something in how they developed in-house that was like needed the in-house stuff to work. Not like from a technical perspective needed to work, but something about how they work together just got completely knocked out by COVID and hasn't been able to restore yet. I don't know.
Almost have to wonder if what really happened here was Shadowlands development being fucked.
I imagine so.
Like expansion development. What if it's actually the case that these patches, you know, they are slower than normal, but they're not a big disaster and the devs are trying hard and good shit's going on, but it's just a case that they got so knocked in their arse by Shadowlands that they really have just had to, you know, they've incurred a massive tax they then had to pay back, because we don't know how much of Shadowlands, like, you know, was concepted but doesn't exist in the game right now. Yeah. We don't know exactly what happened. Like, it seemed like they were way stronger in the quality of the alpha and beta towards the start, and then we were like, where's the maw? What's going on? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And then they did that beta sort of press event thingy. And then that happens, and we're like, okay, here's the maw. Looks cool. They could probably make this, you know, something pretty nice over a few beta updates. Those updates never came. I mean, they sort of came, but not really in the way that most of us thought they would. So, yeah, I just have to wonder if that's really a lot of it. They're really just having to play so much catch-up. And maybe the crazy crucible of Shadowlands development has led to them just, well, you know, just really having to go with not great designs because it's the only thing they can do to ship the game. I mean, like, can you imagine the calls there where you know something is not particularly great, but, you know, you have your ship date. And it comes to the stage of, like, we have to lock this in. We have no way of fundamentally changing what this thing is. All we can do is try to iterate it a bit more so it's less bad. And that's a realistic scenario where here, you know, a game developer will have to develop something that they don't really like or they don't think is the right direction, but they'll understand that they have to do it because if that thing's not done, the game's not shippable. And the game has to be shippable by ship. That's that. Maybe that's how we get locked into these things and how it all just sort of compounds and compounds. And maybe it is just that case where if they were given another 3 months for Shadowlands, we would all be happier.
Maybe. I think one of the concerns I have there, maybe not a concern, more a lesson for the future, is the idea of the risky design decisions that got them in this in the first place. It's like maybe those design decisions were made because they're going, you know, we can iterate on them. We can pull them back a little bit if they don't work out too well. And then the realities of work and the realities of ship is like, nah, we have to pull this back. And then they couldn't. I guess that's just an argument for they should be moving to reverse those design decisions if they were harmful as fast as possible. Eat, you know, whatever bad PR you have to remove them, and then go be safe from now on. Play it safe and good.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, it's not the... I guess it's interesting from the marketing perspective because marketing people will be breathing down your neck for what's the hook, what's the big thing everyone will, you know, go mental over the advertisement for this for. Whereas what actually keeps players and makes them happy is the minutia. It's when you finish a quest and there's an emote that works perfectly, or there's a line that just kind of comes in nicely that works, that maybe took someone another couple minutes of, like, you know, scripting that into the quest encounter. But it was that minutia that I think actually makes people enjoy the game. It's
the sum total of all the little bits.
Yeah, it's when the class design works perfectly and it just clicks, which is thrown entirely off by having these mad out there risky decisions, which is where I think the back of the box feature for World of Warcraft as a thing has been kind of guiding their design decisions too poorly, where the back of the box should be able to say, look at how many goddamn users we have. They're all happy as fuck. That's the back of the box as opposed to gimmicks.
I suppose I seem to think about Final Fantasy 14, and it's like, it seems like the main back of the box like sell is that it's more Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, what they tend to do largely, you'll get this from like watching trailers and stuff, is it's never like, here's the big feature. It's always, because it's a story-driven game, here's the feeling, here's the narrative. A lot of their marketing, especially because marketing in Japan and America takes very, very different flavors.
I think World of Warcraft cinematic trailer that's like Blink 182 would be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, so like you look at how Shadowbringers is marketed, and it was all, especially in the West, was all become the Warrior of Darkness, and it's kind of okay. That's an interesting theme, but that means nothing for gameplay. No. That's the experience of the game overall. Versus here's all of the systems and features. To be fair, they do have systems and they do have features, like Endwalker bringing the Island Sanctuary in 6.1. But generally speaking, it's more experientially, which means they don't have to bend over backwards to get something on the back of the box. They get to go, no, what we want to work on is the back of the box. What's good about the game is the back of the box versus some shit the marketing department told us to jam on there.
Blizzard would be like, it's island fortresses and it's the new build around feature of the expansion. Yeah. No, I get you. So yeah, I mean, I know this is just a very loose discussion of why these things could happen, and at no point are we really claiming to know why any of this is happening. It's just trying to work out some, reasonable faith guesses at not even the specific things that could have happened, but thematically what has happened. Like in the very vaguest terms, like what are the vibes that are going on over there, and how do they make the game harder to develop? And certainly I think, we can't really discount how much just the development of Shadowlands will have set them back.